So our guest speaker tonight is Doug Beckett, founder of the Prince George EVA Association. And his presentation is the energy transition possible? Did I get the title right, Doug?
Close enough. Yep.
Yeah, doable. It's not possible, doable. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Doug.
Okay, so my name's Doug Beckett. I founded the Prince George Electric Vehicle Association around 2006 and started driving electric vehicles in Prince George in 2009. We started off with a pickup truck that a high school mechanics class converted for us. And then I bought a 2013 Leaf, and after it got rear-ended, I've been driving a 2016 Nissan Leaf. And because the electric vehicle transition is hands down happening, about a year ago, a prof at the University of Northern British Columbia asked if we could expand and discuss more than just electric vehicles. So I co-founded the UNBC Energy Transition Group. So about 5 years ago, and let's get here, I did a bit of a speaker series around Prince George about why everybody will be driving electric vehicles. And I was asked to go back to one of the breakfast clubs and give them a new presentation. And so I did prepared this one that I'll be giving tonight for them. And so I'll reflect back a little bit on 5 years ago in Prince George, a little bit of a Prince George perspective on the changes that are happening. So for conflict of interests, just so people know the biases that I'm influenced by, I get no consulting fees. I don't have any patents. So if I'm influencing you to do things, I'm not going to reap money because of my patents. I don't get grants or research support, and I'm not getting financial gain through my investments with my influencing your change of behaviors. I have on occasion received free food over the decades with my promoting electric vehicles and now the energy transition. I did receive a $200 gift card from local solar energy installer because somebody else installed solar and gave them my name as being part of why they did it. So the people who installed solar and myself went out to use the $200 gift card for dinner. But where the conflict of interest really happens is here. If you listen to me, I'm going to benefit immensely because I'm going to start breathing cleaner air, and that's going to improve my health. And it'll also mean I pay less in health taxes. So thank you in advance. So what is the energy transition? It's a transition to no longer using oil and gas and other polluting products. So if we look at Canada, the bar in the middle, pinkish bar, is hydro. So generally that's a relatively carbon clean energy source. And we have a little bit of nuclear above that, which is carbon clean for the most part, but I don't consider it clean. And the rest of the fuels that we rely on, energy that we rely on, are fossil fuels. So they're quite carbon intense fuels. Look at British Columbia, we're similar. We're 70%, actually 81%, because I consider the biofuels a carbon-based fuel, which they are for the most part, if not all of them. So that's 81% of our input energy, primary energy, is supplied through fossil fuels, and 19% is electricity. So if we take we'll call it 20%, 20% that we have, go 40, 60, 80, 100. Does that mean we need 4 times the electricity production to transition off of fossil fuels in British Columbia. And one way you can start to understand that, no, we probably won't need to have 4 times the electricity added to what we already do. So we look at these energy flow charts. So on the left, we have the primary energy in, and on the right is the energy out. So this is petajoules, we'll call them units of energy. So of all the energy going in on the left, we actually use 467, and this is for British Columbia and the territories. We actually use 467 units of energy. And 500 units is end use losses, and another 300 units is loss through the process. So 2/3 of the input primary energy is wasted in our current fossil fuel energy processes. So to understand our fossil fuel use, if we look at the carbon emissions, it gives us a good sense of where the fossil fuels are going. So transportation is 41% of our greenhouse gas emissions, industry 39%, and buildings and communities are 20%. So if we assume a 1-to-1 use for greenhouse gas emissions to energy in, this is the type of breakdown we're looking at. Now, because I drive electric vehicles and I know electric vehicles, this presentation is going to be focusing on the 41% of the fossil fuels going to transportation. So again, that energy chart, BC and the territories, this time for transportation only, we actually use 79 units of energy, and we waste 237 units of energy. So 3/4 of the primary energy going into our transportation in British Columbia is wasted energy. Now, if we look at the tools of transportation, we're used to this vehicle on the left, are gas and diesel vehicles. They're called internal combustion engine vehicles, so ICE vehicles. And because ICE vehicles are slowly going to disappear, we're coming to the end of the ice age. So you can see 25% efficient. So if that means 75% wasted. So there's same output conclusion as that energy chart. Now, as we go to electric vehicles, 87 and 91% of the primary energy going in actually does work. So you're only wasting 13% of your primary energy with electric vehicles. Now, if we think of hydrogen in our fuel cell cars, I'm not looking at the hydrogen as an internal combustion engine fuel, which it can also be, but that's very polluting. So I'm sticking to the cleaner type of technologies. The fuel cell is assumed to be theoretically about 32% efficient. My understanding is they typically are less efficient than that. And if we look at the hydrogen as a combustion fuel, it's less efficient than that still. So it's 25% efficient. So again, compared to the electric vehicle, very inefficient. So BC Hydro, back a while, they've looked at this black line is the electrical production that we've used over time since about 2003 to 2023. And then they've tried to project how much electricity they need to provide into the future. So this bottom line assumes that we do very little or nothing to transition away from fossil fuels. The top line is their estimation of the quickest that BC might transition off of fossil fuels. So by 2043, we're looking at about 90,000 gigawatt hours of electricity if we follow the fastest projection for transitioning off of fossil fuels. Now, BC Hydro very recently put out a call for electricity production, and they want to get 15% increase in electricity from what they produce today by 2030. So you can tell it's midpoint of their projections for the rate of the transition. So from BC Hydro, the left is the actual production and use, or actual use for 2022. And on the right is what they expect we might need by 2030. So in 2022, we use 58,500 gigawatts of electricity. And a 15% increase means we want to produce about 67,000 gigawatt hours of electricity by 2030. That's an increase of 8,500 gigawatt hours. So Site C, which is slowly going to ramp up and start producing between now and 2 years from now, once it's fully operational, they anticipate it'll produce 5,100 gigawatt hours of electricity. So a good portion of that 8,500 gigawatts is required. So let's put Site C into context. What does Site C do? Well, near Prince George, we have an LNG pipeline that's being constructed to the coast. And 2 years ago, I was in an Indigenous community, Clately Tene community just outside of Prince George, for a moccasin walk, a fundraising event, community building event. And a proponent from that pipeline company was at the event, and we chatted for a little bit. And he said they would like to put compressors along that pipeline in order to increase the flow of LNG through the pipeline massively. I forget the amounts that he said. It might be like 8 times increase in volume if they can do that. And he was saying that with compressors and the base pipeline, that would require everything Site C produces. We recently had a public review for a proposed facility in Prince George to make hydrogen. And during that public review period, I looked at their numbers, and roughly it would have required about 1 Site C to operate that one facility. BC Hydro's promotional material suggests that Site C electricity could fuel 1.7 million EVs each and every year on the roads. And based on my numbers, I agree. That's what we can do with Site C's electricity. Now, going back to the fuel cell vehicles, because they're so inefficient, Site C would only fuel 425,000 fuel cell vehicles. I'd rather fuel 1.7 million battery electric vehicles. And BC Hydro says, or it can provide the energy for 450,000 homes in British Columbia. So let's go back to transportation. ICBC data indicates there's 3.7 million vehicles in British Columbia. And taking BC Hydro's production of Site C divided by 3.7, you get about 3,000 kilowatt hours. And like my experience and what I've seen from others, it's about 3,000 kilowatt hours a year will drive a typical battery electric vehicle 18,000 kilometers a year. A hydrogen vehicle to do 18,000 kilometers a year will require 12,000 kilowatt hours per year per each vehicle. So times those numbers by the 3.7, in order to transition all electric or all vehicles to battery electric, we will need to produce 11,100 gigawatt hours of electricity to fuel those vehicles. If we decide to go hydrogen, we will need to increase our production to 44,400 gigawatt hours. So let's go back to BC Hydro's current context. That's what the going all vehicles to battery electrics does to our increased need for production. And that's going to take at least 30 years for that transition to happen, because the vehicles, gas and diesel vehicles on the road today will still be on the road in 20, 30 years. So it'll take a while to require that. So we can easily do that with maybe solar on your house. Now, if we do the hydrogen, so that's about 2.2 Site Cs. And we have one of those Site Cs already coming on. So it's only the equivalent of 1.2 Site Cs more. But we have the other 59% of the fossil fuel use that we'd also like to transition off. Now, if all of those other technologies are similar energy efficiency advantage as our direct electric and battery electric for vehicles are, then my guess is we need about double what we currently produce to not have to use a single drop of fossil fuels. That's not too bad. And we're not talking about doing that overnight. It's going to take decades. So if we do the hydrogen, that's just hydrogen. We're almost doubling our production to do hydrogen vehicles. And if all of the other hydrogen technologies are as inefficient as hydrogen vehicles, and they are from all accounts that I've seen, we're going to need way more. So just the vehicles alone, that's almost 9 Site Cs. Now, something to keep in mind is when somebody uses a block heater in their gas vehicle up around Prince George, I can drive about 700 kilometers on the electricity they use in their block heater for a month. So you're not going to have, you're going to reduce your electrical use because you're not using it for block heaters anymore. All the gas stations use electricity to pump the gas out of the holding tanks into the vehicles. So there's going to be reductions, associated reductions in electricity use when you go to electric vehicles. Now, how much of a reduction compared to the increase, I don't know, but keep that in mind. So how much more electrical production will we need to transition off of fossil fuels? It depends on what we transition to, and where there's lots of choices, but here I'm focused on the option of doing direct electric where you can, battery electric where direct electric doesn't work, and not doing hydrogen, but comparing it to hydrogen. So if we do the battery electric and direct electric, I'm suggesting we probably need to double our electrical production. So we need to produce this in addition to what we're doing today, what we produce today. If we go hydrogen, we need at least 5 times what we produce today on top of what we produce today, maybe even 9 times. Then what about these other things? Are we going to produce more fossil fuel pipelines that require massive increases in electricity? Are we going to be producing hydrogen, doing hydrogen production facilities that require massive electricity production? If we have a limited supply of electricity, let's get our transition in place before we start increasing how much more electricity we need. So this is interesting. If you're looking at where we're going, it's always wise to take a look at investments. So if we take a look at the energy investments, and in this left side, they're showing in the light blue fossil fuels. So that's about what, 1,300 billion US dollars was invested into fossil fuels in 2015. Now, if we look at clean energy, now the portion that I'm consider worth looking at in the clean energy is only the renewable power, the dark blue on the bottom, and the greenish color, the grids and storage. So we're around 600 billion US dollars in 2015. So 5 years ago, when I was doing my other round of talking circuits, the fossil fuels had decreased to about 1,100 US billion dollars. And the clean energy that we're looking at, renewable power, grids and storage, it was maybe 700 billion US dollars. If we look at 2024, fossil fuel investments dropped to about 1,100 billion US dollars, and the renewable power and grids is over 1,200 US billion US dollars. So the spending on renewable power, the grids and storage, is now higher than spending on oil and gas and coal. So I think that's a true telltale sign of where we're going and what's happening. So again, back 5 years ago, because I drive electric vehicles and I started up the EV group, I've been monitoring how many electric vehicles are around, and I have a pretty good feel for it. Plus, I rely on other data, ICBC data, and so on, but that's all lags and difficult. But there was about 60 battery electric vehicles in Prince George in 2019, and about 5 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. In 2024, my educated guess is that there's more than 700 battery electric vehicles in and around Prince George. Now, I'm talking pretty broad when I talk about around Prince George, and more than 60 plug-in hybrids. So again, back in 2019, if you're going out to the dealerships to buy a battery electric vehicle, you had 14 makes and models to choose from, another 27 plug-in hybrids, and 3 fuel cells. Today, you have 60 makes and models of battery electric vehicles to choose from. It's a little harder to choose, but you can buy what you need now much easier. On top of that, there's 36 plug-in hybrids and 2 fuel cells. So people keep asking, is the provincial government targets and the federal government targets, are they reasonable? Are they doable? So back in 2019, the BC government passed some legislation. In 2020, they passed some supporting regulation. And with that, their targets were 10% of new vehicle sales would be zero emission vehicle sales. So that's battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, 30% by 2030 and 100% by 2040. Well, the market took off, especially in British Columbia. And so the BC government figured, well, maybe it's better to update our targets since we're going to be exceeding all of our target achievements. So in 2023, they updated their targets to be 26% by 2026, 90% by 2030, and 100% by 2035. So if we take a look at the new vehicle sales in British Columbia, we go last year, 2023, over 22% of the vehicles sold were zero emissions vehicles. Most of those are battery electric vehicles. So if we look at the sales going from 2022, increasing by the 4% from 18 to 22%, we had 4%, 26%. We're going to meet the 2026 target this year in British Columbia. So British Columbia, it even leads California sometimes if you look at per capita sales of battery electric vehicles and installation of charging stations. So at 22%, we're doing way better than the average of the US, which is 10%, the average of Canada, which is 13%, and even doing way better than the average of the world, which is 18%. And as you can tell, North America is lagging the world with this energy transition. So hydrogen, again, if both of these have the scale of 4 million vehicle sales on the left bar, and if we look at the last quarter, so last 3 months of 2023, more than 3.5 billion battery electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids, most of them are battery electric, not many are plug-in hybrids, but both were sold in the world. If we look at hydrogen, yes, there's sales and there's prototypes getting on the road, but visually they're so close to zero, you cannot see them. So the market has decided that battery electric vehicles are the winner, are the technology to go for. And back in 2022, Bloomberg put out this graph showing the sales of gas and diesel vehicles, your internal combustion vehicles. And then the blue bar, so they're the black, and the blue bars are your zero emission vehicle sales. And you can see that we peaked in 2017 with gas vehicles, and they've been declining pretty much ever since. And the blue bars, the electric vehicles, the volume, the numbers of electric vehicles are increasing. So 2023, 24, 25 are projections from the 2022 Bloomberg. The 2023 global sales of electric vehicles was actually a little bit larger, greater than what they projected in 2022 that 2023 would see. And the sales of gas and diesel vehicles was a little bit lower than what they had projected. So I suspect that we will see that they've overestimated the sales of gas and diesel vehicles for 2024 and 2025 and underestimated the sales of electric vehicles for those years as the projection goes on. So some real life data. I told you I've been driving 3 electric vehicles since 2009. I've driven over, well, about 175,000 kilometers in those vehicles. And I've saved, if we look at the price of fuel, so liters back in 2009, and in that era, it was about $1.08 a liter, $1.33 a liter through the mid-era, and $1.50 a liter in recent times for the gas vehicle, assuming 30 miles to the gallon fuel efficiency, which is the same as 9.4 liters per 100 kilometers. So if we look at my current vehicle, I've driven over 71,000 kilometers. I paid about $1,200 for fueling that driving. That works out to about $17 per 1,000 kilometers. Now I'm a commute vehicle, so I'm filling up at home. Again, if I was 30 mile to the gallon vehicle, I would have used close to 7,000 liters to drive that same distance and would have paid over $10,000. Now, another nice thing with battery electric vehicles is you can make your own fuel in your backyard. I don't know of any gas or diesel vehicle owners who produce their own fuel in their backyard. But so in a year, I put in this solar system a little over a year ago. In the first year, I produced well over 5,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. Now, if you put in a solar system like this today, BC Hydro will give you or can give you up to $5,000 rebate. And this system produces enough to drive my vehicle 30,000 kilometers each and every year for the next 30 to 50 years. And I did that on a $15,000 investment. Again, you can get 5,000 back. Now, the outfit that put this in for me indicated the other day they can now install this for about 12,000. So the price is coming down. So you can install it for $12,000 and you can get $5,000 back from BC Hydro right away. So solar opportunities in Prince George, we have all sorts of big box stores such as the Home Depot, and that's what their roof looks like. Now, if you put solar panels on that roof, sorry, yeah, try to move this picture. You can put well over 2,000 solar panels, 545 watt solar panels on that roof. If you did that, you would produce about 1.4 million kilowatt hours per year from that one building alone. So that's enough electricity to run about 127 homes, or as we do the electric transition, we're going to be using heat pumps and having more electric vehicles. So about 91 fully electric homes, or about 467 electric vehicles. So the hydrogen sector, it's struggling to get off the ground. It's been struggling since Ballard Power in the 1990s. And since the 1990s, the technology for battery electric vehicles, the batteries themselves, the motors and everything is just advancing leaps and bounds and becoming less and less expensive all the time. And hydrogen, there's not much of a distribution network. But if you look out your window, you see hydro wires everywhere. I guess if you're in a big city, there are a lot of them are underground, but that's your pipeline for the electrons. So most of North America already has the pipeline distribution for electricity, which makes the electric transition really easy. Now, I've mentioned in the previous slides about plug-in hybrids. Don't go plug-in hybrid. They're the most complicated vehicle out there. Some people think that they're the best of both worlds. Others, like myself, think they're the worst of both worlds. So they're the most complicated vehicles out there. So they're going to be expensive to maintain. Your maintenance costs are more expensive than a gas vehicle with a hybrid, where your battery electric maintenance cost is greatly reduced, is greatly less than a gas vehicle. Gas vehicles have about 2,000 moving parts, electric vehicles about 200 moving parts. So less parts, less stuff to go wrong. Your hybrids have the gas parts and the electric parts and complicated communication between the two. So just don't go hybrids. It's not worth it. And most hybrids, plug-in hybrids, do not come with level 3 charging. So when you're doing distance traveling, most of the highways are putting in the fast charging, the DC charging, the level 3 charging. So to get a level 2 charging station when you're doing distance driving, it's difficult. If you do find one, you're going to spend 4 to 20 times longer to get the same range in a plug-in hybrid than you do in a battery electric. Now, if going a battery electric isn't in the cards for you today, and you need to get a new vehicle, don't buy your gas or diesel vehicle, lease it. Let somebody else end up with the stranded asset in a few years. We now have 60 makes and models. 3 years from now, there's going to be way, way more, and they're going to be less expensive. So as part of the Prince George Electric Vehicle Association, I'm part of a number of other electric vehicle networks. And through the province, I'm part of about 12 electric vehicle associations and owner groups that recently drafted or wrote a letter that we sent to the 4 main provincial parties, because we have an election coming up in British Columbia in October. And this letter has 10 proposals that we've asked the political parties to bring into their election platforms. So through your electric vehicle association, you should probably have already had access to this letter. If not, please look for it and keep it in mind. These are the different associations and owners groups in British Columbia that signed on to the original sending of that letter. If you want to keep tabs of what's going on in the electric vehicle world, feel free to connect up with me and the Prince George Electric Vehicle Association. Up in the north, we have the Northern BC Canada EV Facebook page. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm able to view all the posts here. And that Facebook page is facilitated by Mark Vivoda. And Mark is also known as the Tesla Prince. He does a lot of recreational activities in and around Prince George, and he drives a Tesla Model 3, and the distance driving he does is amazing. And he has his YouTube channel, which documents all of this, including a couple of episodes on very cold driving electric vehicles distance-wise in very cold weather. So there's a global network, the Global EV Alliance, that I'm part of. There's a national one called the EV Society in Canada. Pretty much every country has its own national EV association. And in British Columbia, these are some that I've been able to track down. If you have, you can get a hold of this slide deck. I can make it available to you. You can post it if you want, along with the presentation. In each slide, there's notes, there's web links to the source data of what I'm presenting for a large part in here. This slide has web links to most of those groups. And I mentioned we have the Energy Transition Group. We started it and started meeting in January. We meet once a month. It's on the second Tuesday of the month. And there is a virtual link if you're interested in connecting virtually. Get a hold of me. We can get you connected that way. We hold the meetings at the University of Northern British Columbia in Prince George, Building 5, Room 173. And the Prince George Electric Vehicle Association, the UNBC Energy Transition Group, and the UNBC Sustainability Team have already organized all candidate forums for October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. There's going to be one forum for each of the 3 ridings that overlap Prince George. Again, this will be available virtually, and it'll be held in our larger Canfor Theatre at the university. So you can subscribe to the 2 newsletters that I put out, the Prince George EV Association newsletter and the Energy Transition Group newsletter. They come out once a month each, and they're free to subscribe. Just email me at that email address there, and you can get on. So open for questions and discussion.
Great. Yes, we'll do the hands up. And great. Yeah, you stopped sharing. So I'm going to stop. No, we'll continue recording because some of the questions might be pretty useful to have. So yeah, up to 20 people now. That's great. So anybody have any questions? Wow, Doug, they took it all in and they understood it all.
Thought I saw Bob putting up his hand.
Did he? Oh, there he is. He put his hand. Go ahead, Bob.
Thanks for the presentation, Doug. We talked about energy use for the LNG. We are in another bad situation down here in Squamish because Fortis BC is building this great big LNG plant to ship gas to China, and they figure it needs more than a Site C dam just for the energy it requires. So it's kind of crazy. I don't know if we're gonna make enough energy, new energy coming online just to handle the ugly LNG gas that's coming our way.
Yeah, and that's part of why I've prepared the presentation for this go around the way I did with the upcoming provincial election. I'd like people to be aware of what the consequences are of LNG pipelines, of hydrogen production facilities, and just get a take from the political parties and from your candidates. What are they going to put priority on? Where are they going to provide the electricity to be used? And how are they going to help BC Hydro make some wise decisions to produce what we need? And if you think of the hydrogen requiring 5 times as much electricity to do the same work, that's 5 times the greenhouse gas emissions, because there's greenhouse gas emissions associated with the production of electricity. That's 5 times or more of the environmental footprint, because if you're doing it through hydro, though BC Hydro is supposed to not produce electricity from any new dams, so it'll be upgrading existing infrastructure to produce more. It'll be solar, it'll be wind, might be nuclear. We're supposed to be nuclear free zone in BC, but that could always change. You know, so the hydrogen is not, it's comparatively not as clean, in my view, as battery electric or direct electric.
I'm going to put my hand up. Okay, there, you saw my hand up. So I was going to ask you a question. You said it would take about, what, 5 times more electricity to produce hydrogen. Is that it when you're using electrolysis, or is that steam reformed methane, which we don't want to do because it's basically natural gas and you're emitting CO2 from that? So is it electrolysis or steam reformed methane, or a combination of both?
The hydrogen proponents have always talked about the need for hydrogen to transition to a clean economy. And the only way to do that is through electrolysis, hydrogen produced through electrolysis. So I've given them 100% credit and assumed that they're good for their word, and we're talking electrolysis. Otherwise, we're talking about horrible poisonous gases being emitted for us to breathe, particles to breathe, and greenhouse gas emissions like you wouldn't believe. So it makes no sense to think of anything but electrolysis.
I absolutely agree with you. You know, making hydrogen from methane is really stupid. I mean, you're just better off to burn the methane. But just to comment, it seems that so many people are just unaware of that, and they just think hydrogen magically appears. So we've got a lot of work to do to educate people as to where does hydrogen really come from.
Well, there's lots of hydrogen. I'm holding it right now.
Yeah.
And it's really, really light to use it.
Oh, well, it is the most plentiful element in the universe. We just can't seem to get it here. Any other questions? Oh, Dave, you've got your hand up.
What else are they using hydrogen for besides the hydrogen cars, which are far and few between?
They use it for the second stage of rocket launches. And that's one place that I don't see us being able to replace hydrogen with something else anytime soon. They want to use it for airplanes. They want to use it for trains. They want to use it for long haul transport truck. They want to use it for steel. They want to use it for cement. And in all cases, the alternatives to hydrogen have proven to be more cost effective and more operationally doable than hydrogen for all of those. Hydrogen's a loser. It's your Swiss Army knife. Can do a little bit of everything, but nothing well.
The only people that are pushing hydrogen are the oil companies who stand to make profit off this and the propaganda that goes along with it. I'm surprised that BC Hydro isn't thinking of more wind and battery storage to cover their peak periods where they require the extra energy. And perhaps when the dams can't produce as much electricity because there hasn't been enough rain to allow that much water to go over.
The legacy automobile manufacturers have also been very strong proponents of hydrogen for a long time. And it's because then you can have hydrogen fuel cell vehicles that use very expensive fuel, subsidized, it's the same price as diesel. So it's unsubsidized, more expensive than diesel or gas, requires all the maintenance or more that gas vehicles currently require. And you have to fill at service stations. You can't fill at home. So they like it. And they also have the networks that are good at capturing tax dollars for subsidies. So it's a bit of a black hole of where tax dollars keep going and nothing gets delivered to us for a long time. Back in the 1990s, hydrogen probably was a very good investment for governments. But since then, with the evolution, the technological advances of batteries, of electric motors and everything, it's a lost cause. It's time to drop it.
Barry Shell.
Thank you.
Barry Shell is the next. Oh, sorry, Dave. Did you have something to add to that?
No, that's fine. We're
Okay.
thinking along the same lines. So it's
Sure. Barry Shell has his hand up with a question. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, hi. I'd just like to say a couple of things. First of all, the solar panel section of your talk was excellent. I've done the same thing. I've talked to the group about it more than once, and it is absolutely brilliant. Everybody should be putting solar panels, and I cannot believe that, like you showed, that the big box stores don't have them on the roof, and schools, all public buildings, that sort of thing. So I don't understand why that's not happening. So that could be a question. Another thing I want to bring up on the hydrogen thing is, did anybody notice there's a class action lawsuit in California against Toyota because the hydrogen, quote, gas stations are broken, and it's actually really difficult to fill your hydrogen car up with fuel. So they've started a class action suit, and there's going to be hundreds of people going after Toyota, and they're probably going to win. So there's a whole nother hydrogen thing that you didn't even talk about. And my final thing is, if I have a question, my question is, how many Teslas are in the Vancouver and Lower Mainland area? It's just mind-boggling to me every time I go outside. It's like you can't turn around without seeing 3 or 4 Teslas. How can we find out how many Teslas are in the Lower Mainland? That's all.
You can go to the ICBC data. I think it was somebody from VEVA provided it to me a week ago, and I did know about it. But you can actually search by postal code even. You can search by communities. It's quite amazing. It's good, but it's very delayed. You're typically 2 years old data.
That might have been John Stonier because he was doing a lot of work in that area. And he was the first one to bring this idea to us, and he did some research on that. But of course, we kind of let that fall off. We just go with sales statistics. Okay.
Actually, it was the Victoria EV Association, Jim Henderson. So I'll email the ICBC to somebody, and you can share it around.
Okay, great. Okay. So I'm going to lower Barry's hand. Dave has his hand up, but we have Ulrich Fischer that wants to go first. So Ulrich first and then Dave.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that hydrogen is a non-starter for cars and things. But I read somewhere that there's deposits of hydrogen gas underground. I was wondering if maybe that could be a transitional fuel for natural gas powered power plants, that sort of thing, until they can get their act together and transition to nuclear or solar.
Yeah, I heard a gentleman, I think he was from Winnipeg, about a year ago, and he was talking about how I think it was 1970s. He was down in on the African continent and drilled a hole, and they're trying to get natural gas, and it wasn't a natural gas hole. He's since gone back and realized it's hydrogen, still leaking hydrogen, and they're using the captured hydrogen locally. And so now they're trying to do the same technology to find hydrogen elsewhere. And the Canadian Shield is supposed to have very high potential for being able to find the hydrogen, but it's going to be deep drilling to capture it. And then you have to distribute it, and distributing it, everything I've read, it's a nightmare. It's not nearly as easy to distribute as natural gas. So even if you can tap into hydrogen, pools of hydrogen that way, it's happening no time soon. Electric vehicles will be all over the road by the time that technology even comes close, and it'll still be crazy difficult to distribute. So good luck.
Great. Over to you, Dave, and then we'll have Emil after you.
I'm just going to answer Barry on the Toyota and hydrogen in Los Angeles. When we were down at the LA car show, we test drove the hydrogen car down there, and Toyota was promoting, I think it was like a $300 a month lease on their hydrogen cars, and that includes your fuel on your lease. So now they had 40 refilling stations down that California area. So therefore, when the stations were broken or there wasn't enough pressure to actually pump it in, because it's at a very high pressure rate, and after they've refueled so many vehicles, they can't refill anymore. So you've now got a leased car that you can't fill up, and you're still paying your monthly lease. So therefore, you've got that magic circle, and because Toyota promised them free fueling on that lease and they can't do it, that's why you're going to get some angry people wanting to take Toyota to court. So I just thought I'd fill that little piece of nugget in there.
And Shell turned off some of their hydrogen filling stations in the meantime too.
Yeah. Emil, go ahead.
Sure. Just a quick question. And one of your earlier slides about the energy requirements for the next few years, the biggest sector increase was in the industrial. And do you know where that huge increase in energy requirement is in the industrial sector? Because it sure beats the electrical increase. It sure beats the EV increase that was in the same slide.
Yeah, BC Hydro projections is part of a pretty detailed report. So if you go to my slide and click on the web link, it probably will take you to the report, and you might be able to tease that out. I haven't looked at that. I did look at the percent increases by the different categories, and yeah.
Okay, just another question for energy production. Have you heard anything from either hydro or any government source of increased incentives for people to put solar panels on their own residential places just to offset the requirement? Because you lose about it's over 10% of energy from initial production by the time you get to your 110 outlet in the wall. So that, that 10% is required to get the energy to the customer. But if that energy source were on the roof, then maybe you could save a couple of gigawatt hours. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and so in the slide deck, when we looked at the 2022 BC Hydro actual numbers, there was a little less than 7,000 gigawatt hours that was wasted. It was the top gray bar. So I've been trying to get some insight from BC Hydro on what is their costs of collecting and distributing locally solar power, because I do believe that you're going to have less transmission losses involved, and you don't need as much infrastructure because you're going to two houses next door. You're not going from Williston Lake to Vancouver. Yes, BC Hydro back July 27th, I think it was, brought in two rebate programs. One is $5,000, up to $5,000 back if you put solar. So you get up to $1,000 per kilowatt of system that you install. And you can get up to $5,000 on battery. So this goes to David's earlier question. I didn't answer that I meant to. So BC Hydro does recognize we need batteries, and they have already installed utility batteries for the big utility service. I've been pushing for a long time. I would rather us use a battery to drive a vehicle, and when it's not driving a vehicle, that we make it available to the grid, because most of the time your vehicle's parked. Now we have one battery that's serving the grid and driving a vehicle. So we don't have the same environmental impacts of creating batteries. And as a EV driver, I can make money selling the use of my battery to the grid. So it just makes the cost of ownership easier to handle. So I would like vehicle to grid. BC Hydro has an electric school bus that is on a vehicle to grid trial already, pilot in British Columbia. So they are listening and they are working in that direction. But we need all the utilities and the governments to create standards for vehicle to grid so that all vehicles, all EVs will be able to participate, and all charging stations will work. So we need that standard.
Before we go
Thank you.
on to any more questions, there's some comments in the chat, and so I'll just read those out so that everyone's got the benefit. Some people don't read the chat quite as readily. So Ulrich Fisher says, the last hydrogen station in London, England shut down a month or so. So, okay, there's one major market there that is not going to be going hydrogen. Ed wants to know, are the slides available online? I think you covered that, but maybe you could just say it again.
They're not online, but I can make them available. Tell me who in your group to arrange to send them to. I don't know if I can email it. Might be a little large for emailing. We can try it, and feel free to post it alongside your posting of the recording.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. We could work that out. If even if you can get it to me in some form, I can put it up on the VEVA Google Drive, and then provide the link to everybody who wants to see it.
Yeah, I'd like to have those slides too. I think it was an excellent presentation. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Bruce. That comes a high pat on the back coming from you.
Yeah, yeah, and I have to agree with Bruce. An excellent presentation, very informative, very straightforward. So this is from Ulrich. The entire session is going up on YouTube. The answer to that, Doug can't answer that, but I can. No, just the recording. Some of these questions might get in, might not. I may have to stop the recording. Did I stop it already? Can't tell. I think it's still going. Yeah, it's still recording. So how much, yeah, all of Doug's presentation will go up on YouTube. How much of our questions that goes up on YouTube, can't say at this point, but at least a couple that are relevant. And from Barry Shell, BC Hydro does have a grant program if you put solar on your house. Oh, he's reminding us of what he said already. $5,000 for the panels and $5,000 for a battery. And he's included the website that you can click on. So if you're interested in that, you can do that. And I think we'll stop recording there, but we can still carry on with